Sweet. All right, I'm Ben Dogood, spelled not like you would think it looks like, but that's my name. So we're going to be doing some web dev, kind of mobile hybrid app dev. Intro to MeteorJS, Lightspeed App Development, which is really a platform. So let's start off with a history of the web. So if you kind of go back in time, you see like the web started as this like a bunch of linked documents, like HTML documents. Everything was kind of server-side like logic. You know, you'd hit a route and you'd be given an HTML page, and that was it. There was none of this like JavaScript front-end reactivity. It's pretty simple. So like I said, most things were server-side apps. A lot of stuff followed the kind of classic three-tier model, or like the HTTP model, where you have the separations of you have the UI, which you see on the client. You have the server, which gives the client everything, and the database, which gives the information to the server. So that would look like, you know, the client makes a request, google.com. The server fulfills that request by sending it the HTML, and that would be it. There wasn't none of this like, I guess google.com is not a good example, but it would give you a page with like other links and you could click, and that was the flow. Later on, the idea of kind of REST came in, and so you could hit specific endpoints and get like JSON data. So yeah. Then came like the rise of the SPAs, or the single page applications, would be what that stands for. I think Gmail was kind of the first one to do this, where you would click a button on like a website, and instead of sending you to a new page, they would pull JSON data and then display and like format that in like real time and make that kind of really interactive. So this kind of ushered in a phase of like front-end reactivity or interactivity. And it was driven by kind of the rise of mobile devices, because for a lot of different reasons, like the latency on mobile devices is really bad, so you don't want to force a full page reload when you're just trying to change data, stuff like that. So yeah, Gmail kind of, everything up to like now is kind of in this area. So this type of app is much harder to write compared to the server side, like all HTML kind. You have code in the cloud, which would be the server. Cloud is way overused word. So code on the server, code on the client. So now instead of having just, I don't know, PHP, which I think is horrible, on the server, or something like Node, or .NET, C#, Java web pages, just on the server, you now have JavaScript on the client. So you have to keep track of kind of two different sets of code running in two different places, as well as like if you're not using mean stack, which I guess I'll kind of talk about. We'll talk about it now. Where, you know, if you're using PHP and HTML and JavaScript, so PHP would be the back end, and then JavaScript on the front end, you have to maintain two different, like, totally different coding paradigms, like different idioms, like across languages, which is really like, I don't know, it's different. And like, people will complain about context switching a lot, and I've heard people say context switching is not that big a deal, but when you have to revert your mind to think about PHP and then you're jumping to fix a bug back into the client, it's like a totally different style of coding. I don't like context switching. So mean stack started with Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node, which if you're in software engineering, I think you're supposed to be using that. And the idea there was it's all JavaScript. So like Mongo has a very JavaScript friendly like database driver. Express is just a JavaScript server router. And server, I guess, and the Node is server-side JavaScript, Angular is client-side JavaScript. So you get just one language paradigm across. So MeteorJS kind of follows that same like design pattern of the mean stack, where it's JavaScript everywhere, which I'll get to again later. But also, if you really want to be competitive in the real world, you look at the Facebook, Twitter, Google type apps. You have to support multiple platforms. That's more code bases that are different. So you have, you know, iOS, Android, Windows if you're ambitious, as well as web, maybe desktop, so that type of things. Like, it just grows in complexity if you want to be serious about kind of competing. It's expensive to have native apps for every platform. Like, it's just, you have to have different development teams. They're very different. So if you were to roll out your own solution, similar to Google and Facebook and Twitter and these kind of giant, I don't know, super companies or whatever you want to call them, what would you need? So if you think about something like Facebook, if you're ever on Facebook and all of a sudden you see at the top, it's like, hey, there are new stories in your home feed, like, you didn't do anything to facilitate that popping up. Like, that's happening on its own. So you need a way of watching the database for changes. Facebook behind the scenes is watching the database for changes, and when they will push those changes and like notify you. Which, going back to like the past and like HTTP, is not super easy to do unless you're doing some kind of like polling from the client. I'll talk more about that later. So you have to have some kind of protocol that you've invented that runs on top of WebSockets to push data to client in real time. That's a lot, so let's break it down. Normally you'd use something like HTTP. So going back to the Gmail example, I click a specific message, and Gmail is going to send an HTTP request to the server, get that message data, and then render it to you. So WebSockets is just a faster way of communicating back and forth, essentially, where the server can send you the data before you ask for it. So yeah, they're pushing you the data instead of you asking for it, which is essentially kind of like the pulling model. So with this protocol, there's a lot of state to it, which I'll talk more about later. But where HTTP, you're just going to go, okay, or kind of like the REST way would be, I have data. And so I'm going to go like /data and send a GET request to that, or like /API/data, and it'll just give me all the data. Or I can pass in like a specific query string to get more, but every time that's going to give me whatever the database has. Whereas a stateful connection would be, okay, I want all of the users that have a certain name. And just whenever a new one appears, they're going to be pushed to me. So it's a totally different like mindset than the traditional kind of REST HTTP style. And then if you want to get competitive, like Facebook, Twitter, all these companies have some kind of cache on the client. So if you've ever done something like Facebook comments, you're going to go, okay, type in a comment, hit send, and just close the app. So normally, kind of going back to the HTTP paradigm, you would send that request. Once it's saved in the database, then you would render it to like the page, because you don't know if it's really saved until it saves in the database. Kind of this thing called optimistic UI, where you're going, okay, we're going to assume it's going to save, so we will give you the comment right away, and then like we have some kind of cache that's like a mini database in our front end that we're actually saving it to, and then that cache is what will actually make sure it's like persisted with the backend. Also, if I'm speaking too fast or there are questions at any time, feel free to raise your hand. Should have started with that. But as data changes, you actually have to change the DOM. So like there's all these things you have to think about if you want to like make a really competitive kind of modern app. Yes.
Back when you were back one slide, when you were saying stateful bidirectional protocols, not HTTP. So by that you mean like I want to display a list of users or something. Then if someone like creates a new user, that'll automatically like push that data to the front end. Is that what you meant without you having to ask for the list of users again?
Yeah, and it's also, so like HTTP is not stateful, where every time I go, okay, give me all like /users with that start with like the name Ben or something. Mm-hmm. Like every time I'm going to send that, and it's just going to give me whatever it has. So that's very like, if you want to scale that out, you just have more servers, and they all do the same thing. Where if you have something that's like stateful, it has to know like what you see already. So instead of like, I'm not going to pull for everything again. What's going to happen is I will just get updates of like what is already there.
Okay.
I may be able to explain it a little better.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, I get what you mean.
Okay. It's the issue of like scaling is a little differently, because you can't, with Meteor and something like this, you can't just throw more servers at it, because the server you're connected to has the information that like it knows you have and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because they don't want to push all the data to you every time something in the database changes. They're going to go, okay, you're connected right now and you see these 4 users. Well, we now have this 5th one, so we're just going to push kind of like the change set. Right. If that makes sense. Where HTTP, we just be, okay, give me everything. And then on the client, I would parse out what I don't have, type of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, going back to that, modern apps serve data, not HTML. Modern apps shouldn't need a refresh button. Modern apps should exist in real time. Is refreshing the page even necessary anymore? So again, like you go to like Facebook, you go to Twitter, things like that, where they're proactively or preemptively giving you, hey, like there's a notification. you got that notification without refreshing the page. Which if you think back like to the server side model, kind of classic like HTTP model, then every time I'm gonna hit refresh to get updates. So is that necessary anymore? Like we see all these real companies doing that. So what is the solution? The genesis of Meteor. Meteor was born. Meteor provides a complete JavaScript application platform, an SDK and different libraries and packages, build tooling, distribution. So as far as like deploying your code, some really cool hot code push stuff, and then running code in the cloud. Again, like cloud is overused. So why JavaScript? I believe JavaScript is the one language to rule them all. It's the gateway drug. You start using JavaScript and you can't stop. I am evidence of that. So it runs, especially nowadays, anything that has a browser, which is everything, pretty much. Like Xbox has Edge, and like PS4
has its own browser.
So everything has a browser. Your mobile phone, computers. If it has a browser, it can run JavaScript. It's the most popular language on GitHub, which is really cool. And then NPM, which is Node Package Manager, which also has a lot of client-side, not Node-related packages, is the largest programming language package manager repository ever. That's a long sentence. So, like, there's a lot of good things to using JavaScript. So what is Meteor? It's an open source platform for building JavaScript apps, built to power the next generation of apps. Is there more down? There was. So, one language everywhere, talked about it. So, because we can do that, we can have Node on the server, Node meaning you're running JavaScript on the server and the client. You can do things called isomorphic / universal, kind of the terms being thrown out, where you have the same set of code that runs on both the backend and the client. So that's like less that you have to maintain, like isomorphic JavaScript. So you have, something like if you've done web development and you're trying to send a post request, you're trying to add something to a list, right? You would have to send that to the backend. It would have to validate that, but usually you're going to have another set of validation before you even are allowed to click the button. So like on login forms, you can't click the submit button until you fill everything out. But then on the back end, you're still going to have to check that, hey, did we get all the data? And so like there's two different times you're doing that. If you do something like isomorphic or universal JavaScript, you can have that set of validations kind of in one place, which is really cool. And again, helps for like maintainability, and there's all the other good things. So yes, same language, client and server. I'm supposed to be going down. Browser and mobile. So Meteor it uses this cool technology called Cordova, which essentially lets you build a hybrid app. So it will appear as a native app. You would download it. I shouldn't say native. It will appear as an app on your phone. Download it from the App Store or the Play Store. But what Cordova does is essentially just opens up a web view. So it's running your website, but in like an app interface, which for a lot of non-technical people makes more sense. And you still can you can have access to the native kind of like accelerometer or camera using Cordova, and there's a lot of plugins for that. Keep going to the right. All right, live updates. Data updates live. It's real time, very real time. We'll get to some cool demos of that in a little bit. Meteor provides a unified package system. So you have one world of packages, so NPM, Cordova packages. And a lot of these, the reason there's an extra... So one of my issues with Meteor at first was, okay, we have NPM. Why do we need another package repository? And the answer was Meteor packages were built to be like client and server, or even like mobile and server type of stuff, where NPM is just not like meant to be used in both sometimes. So that is the reason for that. Radically less code. And this you'll see in some demos soon. It's just like they've taken care of so much for you. It's super awesome. Hot deploys. So how frustrating, if you've ever tried to like deploy an app, like a website or whatever, it can be kind of frustrating. If you've never done it, like I wouldn't even know where to start, but Meteor gives you this way where you can just go command line, like Meteor deploy, and then you can deploy it to a subdomain of meteor.com, which is kind of more for like prototyping purposes, but again, super easy to see like real results very quickly. And the Galaxy. So Meteor's open source. So how do they make money? They have like a subscription service, kind of like for enterprise companies, so they can like have real support and stuff. But Galaxy is a hosting solution provided by MDG, which stands for the Meteor Development Group, which is the team that makes Meteor. They're using Docker and AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, to like successfully handle like deploying of apps and like auto scaling, where you're just pushing buttons like, okay, I want to add more servers, and they're taking care of, again, all that like stateful bidirectional scaling like for you, which is really, really cool. All right, Meteor core project. So how does the magic work? So we have IsoBuild, LiveQuery, and again, these are like, IsoBuild is the package managing solution. LiveQuery is what is doing the real push updates along with DDP, which is, I always want to say distributed data protocol, but I think that's wrong. It's something like that. Full stack database drivers, so we'll get to that, and then front end reactivity using their library called Tracker.
It's distributed data protocol.
Distributed, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Thanks for the fact check. Meteor basics. Here's the agenda of what we're going to do. So now we're going to get to kind of like real hands-on code. Let's talk and learn. File folder structure. So there's kind of like, it's really flexible the way Meteor has it set up. So the first slash would be like your root directory of your app. And if you put anything in the server folder, it will only run on the server. Put anything in the client folder, it will only run on the client. And then you can have a slash public, which are static assets like pictures and GIFs or videos. And then anything else will run on both the client and the server. So there's a couple special things. Slash lib in any of the folders. So at root, it'll load before anything else. Then if you have like main.js, it'll load after everything else. So it'll kind of like be like your starting process, your entry point. Everything else will just load in alphabetical order. And then if you're writing your own packages, you can control the order manually. But I haven't had any issues with controlling the order, so that's cool. Like I said, otherwise it's very opinionated, very flexible. You can kind of put things where you want. So if you want to put everything in one file, you can. I would not recommend that. I'd like kind of do it in the demo, but it's a very small demo. Would never do it for anything big. So all right, packages. So there's several different kinds. These first four are all Meteor packages. So there are Meteor core packages, which are the ones like these. There are like set ones that are like kind of core to Meteor itself, because Meteor is essentially a fancy build tool and a set of given packages. So those would be, and then official packages are things you can add without typing in a username. And that would look like, no, don't look at the code. You guys do that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to add something like Blaze is one, I would just do that. Where if it was an unofficial or like third party, I would have to do like username :Blaze. So pretty simple. And it's not like, I don't really like the term unofficial, because unofficial sounds like, oh, like this is not supported, this is scary, we shouldn't use this. But that is not what that means. I think I just call it third party packages. And then there are local packages. So you can have like a packages folder and just write your own packages within your own app. And then NPM packages, there's a couple different ways to pull them in, but you can write a little kind of wrapper package that'll just pull them into your app itself. And if you want to write a package, there's a link for you. Should also say this presentation is built using HTML, and I'll have the link later if you want to get it again. Oops, did I miss something? No. All right, so the view layer. So Blaze is Meteor's like default, their homegrown solution. Meteor 1.2, version 1.2, which came out, I guess last month, shipped with like official support for React and Angular. So, which is super awesome. I'm a huge fan of React. Not a huge fan of Angular 1. Angular 2 looks promising. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. We'll get there. I'm gonna go over Blaze today since it's kind of like Meteor's homegrown solution, and but if you're interested, Meteor has its own like tutorials for getting started, and they have one building the same kind of little to-do app for Blaze, React, and Angular. So it's really cool. And then once again, like there's support for other libraries using other packages for things like Polymer and Bootstrap, which is incredible, and other things. So, code. Let's do this. Blaze templates. They run on top of Spacebars, which is a fork of Handlebars.js, if you've ever used it before. If not, it's very simple. You can include, there's three basic things. You can include other templates, which literally just looks like that. So everything is going to be wrapped in these double curly braces or handlebars, we'll call them, or I guess space bars in this sense. Just throw in the greater than sign and your template name. It'll just include it right there. There are expressions, so if you put that in HTML, like wrap it in a p tag, whatever the title is for that context would get rendered to the page. Like it would just be hot swapped in. We'll show you an example that should clear things up if you're confused. And then block helpers. So you can do things like for each item in like a post list for each item in the list, like then render this template or render this HTML string. And you can also do if and else if type stuff. And there's others. And there's the Spacebars docs if you want more info. Oops. All right, code. So in order to make a Blaze template, you just use the HTML template tag. You give it a name, posts list, and then your HTML go inside. And so this is essentially just saying, okay, for each, so we have this div class that's wrapping posts, and then I'm going to go for each posts, so for each item in posts, I'm going to render posts item. And I'm going to pass the context of the current post in the list into post item. If we come down here, here's the template for post item. So we have this div with some CSS stuff. We have this conditionally applying like a selected CSS class if it has the so like if posts.selected is true, then it would render what is inside the if. And then we have some other things like URL, title, kind of those expressions, and domain. So jumping to the JavaScript. Also, this is to clarify posts list HTML and posts items.html. You can separate them. You could put both of these in the same file, and as long as like when Meteor goes and builds your project, it's just looking for template tags. But I like to separate everything in files. Makes more sense, I think. So there are these things called helpers. So here we go. I'm defining the posts helper on the posts lists template. So jumping back up, oops. So this helper here, I'm defining that, and I am just returning this posts object. This is just a simple JavaScript object or array which contains two objects. Each one will be a post, and they have a title, URL, and selected. So that would pass it in, and we have URL, title, and selected, and that would just like render exactly what those kind of plain JavaScript objects are showing. And then we have this domain thing here, and that is a helper on the post item. And so that'll do things like so it uses this.url. This would be that current context of like the post you're passing in. And it's just going to return the host name, which is just some kind of like HTML DOM API logic, which isn't exactly relevant, but you can do things like that. So in the eventing, so how do you make events work? Really simple. If you know jQuery, if you don't, it's still really simple. So you have template to-dos item. So this is separate from the other example. So you have a list of to-dos or a to-dos item. Dot events, and you just pass in this JSON or JavaScript object, and I will define the click button, and this is just a jQuery event. So this is the click event on the like jQuery button. So I could have done something like this where the jQuery selector is any input type text. This bottom one is saying whenever a blur event happens on that text, then like run this function. So going back to, if I click the button, and once again, like this could be the class button, the ID button, or like stuff like that, jQuery select. So I'm going to get the event, and I'm just going to, this is actually Mongo call. I'm just going to update the, like, that Mongo document, which we'll get to in a little bit. The idea of this is kind of how does events work. So that's kind of the gist of Blaze. It's like really simple, really clean in comparison to things like Angular, which the learning curve is way higher, I think. So, shift gears, let's talk about collections. So Meteor, kind of the one thing that they're working on, not the one thing, but is Meteor currently is kind of married to Mongo, like MongoDB. And there's reasons for that is because you're doing this full stack database driver, so you have to have the same API on the server and the front end for doing things. And they are working on things like SQL support, and I think PostgreSQL and Rethink DB I've seen. So it's coming, but it's not like official yet, but other people are using it. So it's doable. So collections. What am I doing? Database everywhere. So you have that like mini Mongo, is what they call it, which is the client-side cache. Usually you want to define collections as lib, or in the lib folder, because you want to be able to see it on both the back end and front end. And lib will run anywhere in the root lib. And it would look like this. Posts equals new Mongo collection posts. And then you can insert away. Note I didn't var that. What is this horrible JavaScript practice? We are defining posts to be a global variable. But there's a good reason for that, and it's because we want to access it everywhere. So normally you do things like tuck that away in some kind of like module and require it. It's a little different with Meteor. And this paradigm might shift when they get more of the ECMAScript 6 like module support. If you have no idea what that means, we can talk later. Or whenever. So Meteor Mongo, I'll show you the demo. Really cool little thing they did. Let's talk about pub subs. Who doesn't love pub subs? I wish this was a chicken tender sub. So publications and subscriptions. Still thinking about subs. So pub subs. So this is what I think is like, if I had to pick one thing about Meteor that's like the coolest, like biggest paradigm shift, it would be this. And it's the idea that, once again, like I don't have to go back and constantly like pull the database for changes using like set timeouts and HTTP requests. I can just say, hey, like I want to subscribe to all of the items in this list, or I want to subscribe to all the items that have a certain field is true, or something like that. And then all I do is that, and I just will get updates in real time, and everything will just change. It's a very declarative syntax, really cool. It's kind of like the REST paradigm, but for WebSockets, if you know what that is. So here's a quick example. So I have the comments. All of these are in different files. So once again, this would be in the lib file, where we're just simply creating a posts collection in Mongo. On the server, we are going to publish, and we're naming the publish posts by author. It's going to take in an author, and it's going to return from the database anything that has been flagged false. So that's something, maybe that's profanity, maybe that's whatever. And that matches the given author that we pass it. And so this is on the server, where you're kind of exposing this endpoint. And on the client, you're going meteor.subscribe. So I'm subscribing to this publication, and the arguments that I'm passing in is Bob Smith. So this is going to give you like any posts by Bob Smith that are also flagged false. And I will just get a constant like stream of them in my client's mini Mongo. So my mini Mongo database on the client will be kept in sync with whatever's in the database. And so going back to the client, so actually kind of in the view, in the Blaze view, you would have this template. So I have a template called posts, and I would define a helper on it, also called posts. Probably should have changed the name. This could be my posts. And I just call posts.find, and then I'll give me everything in my client database. So then I could do something in the front end like, I don't know, do a little like each tag for each my posts. Do something. I hit tab. So nice. I don't know what happened. But the client, moral of the story is the client will only see the posts that have been flagged false and post with the author Bob Smith. And you will get a constant stream of that. So if other users are interacting with the authors and adding things or changing them or editing them, you will get any updates that happened just while you're on the screen. I think, yep, let's do the demo now. All right. So I made this simple little app where we have just some posts. And I have two browsers because we'll see the reactivity there. So here's my HTML and my JavaScript. And there are some comments here, so we'll change some things in a minute. But to kind of go over things, can you all see that? Do you need me to make it bigger?
It's pretty good. It's fine.
Okay, sweet. If you need it bigger, let me know. So I'm using Bootstrap because it's easy. Or maybe I'm using MeteorJS CSS, whatever. I am. So we have this H1 simple demo, which is just this up here. We have a class card, and this is the one that has the button in it that says insert. So this card here. And then I will skip this block for a second. We have this blue-gray card that says end of the line here. And then I have this template I call post. So going back up here, so I, for each posts, render a post template. And like realistically, I would have put this template in another file, but for ease of displayness, I put them in the same file. So this is my post template. So for each post in posts, I'm going to pass it in here, and it's just going to have a title and a content, and it is a hoverable card. So we can come over here and see that. Hoverable cards, there are 3 posts I started with. The reason I started with 3 posts is here. If there's nothing in the database, so post.find.fetch, length is 0, nothing in the database. I just seed it. So that's all I'm doing there. So we don't need to see that if statement. So if you notice, I currently have done, oops, I don't need this line. Let's see. So another cool thing, hot code push, which I talked about a minute ago. I didn't hit the refresh button, and it refreshed. And I think, yep, I didn't touch it, and it refreshed. So that's kind of this hot code push thing where you're saving things in your code, and it is just like, it's more than just refreshing the page for you. It is like live changing. So if there was like state in this app, it would keep the same state, but like change how it renders, which is really cool because it's more than just, oh, it's refreshing for you. That's so cool. You don't have to hit Command R, Control R for you Windows people. So how are we doing that? We have these 3 posts in the database, and we can check that there are 3 posts. So this is where, okay, to run your Meteor app, this is my directory that I'm in, where I just have those 2 files, and there is a hidden .meteor folder, but you don't need to touch that. I just type in Meteor, and it'll build it and run it and serve it to localhost 3000. Building the application. Bam, app running localhost 3000, and that's where I'm at. So let's go ahead and refresh since I restarted everything. So that's how you do that. So in the same directory, I can come over here, so I can open a new one, and this is the same one. I can do Meteor, Mongo, and now get a Mongo driver like for that Meteor application. And I can do things like, ooh, I don't even know Mongo queries. I have one here in a second. But I think what's kind of crazy is, well, let's do it. Let's do it. What would Shia LaBeouf say? So I'm essentially accessing the database directly. And I'm going to call like db.post.insert, and I'm inserting an object with the title Mongo console, and the content is going to say post inserted from the Mongo console from the DBA, but let's change it to sneaky hacker. I hit enter, right result, inserted. I come back over here. I didn't have to touch the page, and we already have Mongo console across everything that's connected to the app, which is huge. I didn't have to do, if you look at the code, like, I'm not doing anything for that to happen. So, let's real quick talk about this. So, again, I shouldn't put these in the same file, but to display them all at once, it made a little bit more sense. So I have this if Meteor is client, which is basically only going to run what's inside the if statement on the client. Same thing with the server, if Meteor is server. Otherwise, it'll run it everywhere. So I'm creating this posts collection, which everything has access to, on both the client and the server. On the server, the only thing I'm doing is seeding the database if it needs to be seeded. And then on the client, I am defining these template helpers. And the body tag is like implicitly a template. So that's how I'm doing that. So I'm just defining posts, which is directly connected to this one, and it is returning everything I see in my mini Mongo database. Post.find, and that is live, which is why you saw Mongo console appear without me having to do anything. And then I have this event. So I haven't done this yet, but if I click the button, and the only button I have is this one. So if I click it, it'll just create a new object and call posts.insert. So this is happening on the client. We are inserting directly into the client database, mini Mongo database. And what's going to happen, can I not scroll? Nope. What's going to happen is it will then sync that database with whatever's in the real like source of truth database, my Meteor database. So I hit insert, and new post from events, such wow, appears across everything that's connected because it's synced to our actual database, which is crazy. Okay, so let's do some other things you can do, because we can insert directly from the client. I can do things like this, which I can't make it bigger. So I'm inserting another post just like I did before. Post inserted from the browser console from Leet Haxor. We see that happen here, and here if I scroll down. So like that's inserting directly to the database. Now, why is that really bad? Let's talk about this for a second. So, So now I'm going to go, okay, post.find.fetch, which will return, fetch returns an array of like what's currently there. For each item in it, post.remove docid. That's bad. If I hit enter, all of the documents in the database will disappear in the real database. Sad day. So that you shouldn't be able to do, right? So kind of the idea is Meteor ships with these two packages, which makes things really easy to prototype with. And it's called insecure and auto-publish. I'll get to auto-publish in a second. I don't need this. Bye. So if I remove insecure, and they just ship these for like prototyping purposes. So I call remove it, it'll remove the package, and then run Meteor again. Make sure I have this copied again. Also, you should see, it'll say seeded. I told it to log, and since we wiped everything from the database, it'll put those three things back there. So you see these three, such well, much win. So now if I try and do this again, we removed insecure. So what that's going to do is say, you can't insert like directly into the client database and it's sync unless you explicitly allow it to, which I won't get to today, but it can be done. And you saw it. You saw Firefox. Nothing changed. Nothing made it to the real database, and it didn't sync back to the Firefox page. But you saw this flicker on this page. So I'll do it again. And what the flicker is doing is it is optimistically assuming, okay, we removed it from our mini-Mongo client and then tried to send it back to the client. But since we removed insecure, it's going to go, okay, you can't do that because that's obviously insecure. Hence the package name. So it's going to flicker because it's optimistically going, okay, that should work. No, it shouldn't. And it'll roll back, which is really cool. Now, since I removed insecure, I broke insert. Because if we go back to the code, I'm just calling posts.insert new post. And we can't do that anymore. But it's really easy to get around that. So let's fix that by writing a Meteor method. So instead of doing post.insert, I will call Meteor call insert posts, new post, and up here I've already pre-typed it. Fancy. So Meteor methods, and I'm defining this outside of the client and server, so this runs in both. I'm naming it insert post, and it'll take a post. It's going to check that the post.title is a string and that it has a post.title. Post.content is also a string. And if you wanted to add other validation logic, this would kind of be the place. And then, since right now I'm not in the client, I can then insert direct into the database. So, yeah, new post. This should work, no problem. So I'm going to save, come over here, watch it live update, and then hit insert. We fixed insert. So now it works. But there's also a problem. And the problem is I'm still using auto-publish. So auto-publish is inherently bad because I am publishing everything from the backend, like from my backend database to the client. So I'm just dumping it into the mini-Mongo cache. So I'll show you pub subs in a second, but you had a question.
Yeah, that Mongo method that you made, so that's calling, whenever you press the insert button, it's calling that insert post, right?
Yeah, so
is it calling insert post from the client? Or you said it was calling it from the server, right?
So right here, this line is in the client.
Right.
This is in the click button event handler, right? And it's going to call the meteor.call, and it's going to pass the new post object that we just created here. It's going to pass it to that function, which would then get hit here. And this is on the server. Yeah, it should be there. And the reason it's not in just the server is to handle that optimistic UI part. So like I could put this in the server, and I guess like when you think about it, that would be kind of more secure in a sense. But it's going to end up running the function kind of twice. It'll run it once on the client and give you that optimistic like feedback right away, and then run that same set of validations on the server. But it just prevents you from inserting directly into the posts, like collection itself.
So how is that communication getting from the client to the server to like call this method on the server?
So they're using DDP to do that.
Okay.
Now I'm not exactly sure like implementation details, but because it's a little it's WebSockets.
Okay.
They're
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So that Blaze syntax there on the left on line 19 to 21. So like we have the template defined below on 31. So that's usually a different file.
Yeah.
So if you placed that below the end of line, like then so I'm just asking. I guess that template is what's put into the bracket post. Right?
Yeah. This right here, the inclusion.
So the app will just search for templates named post.
Yeah. So you can.
Those names have to match where you define it on that attribute.
Yes. This one and this one have to match, or it wouldn't. That's like how it knows what to search for.
Posts itself was defined on the client side.
So this posts is referring to the template helper posts.
So I guess for when you say like pound each, is that always helpers or is it just any sort of? Like
Yeah, the pound each is going to be helpers, and then the greater than kind of inclusion is always going to be templates, and then you can have other things like down here. These are just expressions, but they're bound. They're like implicit helpers basically. because I don't have to type like helper that, but it kind of knows how to handle that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sweet. Any other questions? Not yet. So, did I show you that this works? I think it did. It does work. So, okay, yeah. Publication. So, Meteor ships with auto-publish, again, which is for like rapid prototyping. And it'll just dump the whole backend database into the client, which is inherently bad, especially if you're dealing with sensitive user data. Like, you can't do that. But it's not meant to do that, so it's not the intention. So I come here now, and Firefox beat Chrome. I may have to actually refresh it just because we reset the server. Now we have no posts. We can't see anything, which means posts.find here is returning nothing, meaning there's nothing in the client database, which makes sense because I'm not publishing anything. If I'm not publishing anything and we're not subscribing to anything, we shouldn't see anything. So in the client, I need to do this Meteor subscribe all posts, but I could filter that. But for this example, it like doesn't exactly make sense to filter. And then onto the server, I can expose kind of that endpoint to which to subscribe to. So I can say Meteor publish all posts, and this is going to dump everything. It'll like return it to whatever explicitly subscribes to that publication. So if I save this, come back over here, we now have all our posts. I don't know why Chrome is spazzing out, but that's really cool. So that is kind of how, like, and I could filter that down here. I could find all posts that have like a given title, kind of like we saw earlier. But just for the simple example, I didn't do that. Any questions about that? This is kind of it for this simple demo.
Can you just reiterate that? This is subscribe to publish. So you subscribe to all posts.
Yes. So what's going to happen is the client loads, and it's going to say, okay, so subscribe to all posts. Down here in the server, we have defined all posts. We're just naming things by string typing, which is going to say, okay, if you publish or if you subscribe to all posts, we are going to give you back this. And that is going to be a live, like real-time cursor, is what they're called behind the scenes, which is essentially going to dump it into your mini Mongo database. And so the client is then going to take all the posts in its mini Mongo database and show them to the client through this template kind of directive.
Is there a command to see all pub subs?
There's this thing called Meteor Toys. Where's Meteor.toys, hipster domain name. Which essentially, is there like see how they work? Okay, I don't want to do that. It's essentially like a like DevTools, but in your browser. There's got to be a link to an example. I don't want documentation. I don't know. We can talk later about that. But yeah, you can do things like see everything that we're published or subscribed to and see all the data. This is kind of like makes kind of like an IDE for Meteor, but it appears like in the browser. It's really cool. Actually, I know one used to live here. It is here. Yep, Control M. So this down here, so I can see everything that I'm like subscribed to. Make that a little
This
bit.
is like your app.
So yeah, so this is like an app. This app is kind of the Meteor to-do app. This one I didn't make. Is like the Meteor to-do app, and then this is like the DevTools part. Which this one is just Mongo specifically, Mongo L. I don't know how to say it. And it'll just show you all of the things that you're subscribed to, and there are other things too. If you go to Meteor Toys, this is a piece of Meteor Toys, but side tangent, I guess. So yeah, so that's what's happening there. Do you have any questions about this example? I can always come back later.
Oh, so are these subscriptions technically like labeled essentially, so that if you wanted to
Yeah. So it's kind of using this all posts label or string typing. This string is however you want to call it, and that's what it's doing. And in this example, maybe this is not the best example because I'm just passing all of posts, but you could filter it kind of like we see. Where was I filtering it? In pub subs. That's the end of the demo. Skipping around a little bit. Whatever pub subs was. It's over here. Oh, what's up? Yeah, right here. So you could do something where I'm publishing posts by author. Again, that's my label. And I'm actually taking an argument, and I'm only returning the posts that match that query. And I'm taking anything that matches the query and giving it to you in your client Minimongo database. And you can subscribe to multiple things and like publish multiple things. So it's not like you have to hit everything at once. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And does that subscription also prevent someone from going through the developer console to try to do something?
Yes, it does. And Meteor has this really cool account system where I think this is nice. The next slide. Nice segue. So you can just do Meteor add accounts UI and accounts password, and it essentially will just give you a full-fledged account system for you with like even little like Blaze templates for like logging in. And you don't have to handle any of that yourself. And with that, there's a special, I don't know what to call it. It attaches something to the Meteor object where in your publish function, like if you're trying to publish user-sensitive data, you can check like if the ID, which would be like the current ID of the currently logged in user, like matches the ID that's attached to like the posts, which essentially would say like, okay, you will return all the posts that user owns. But they're not passing in the user string, because if you pass in the user string, then anyone could go to the dev tools and just like guess random strings and figure it out. Does that make sense? Okay. So do that. So, counts. Counts are super awesome. They give you this login buttons directive, which you can pass some options to if you want. But really simple. It's actually the same one. It's going to look just like the one they have here. And I'm logged in already. How do I sign out? So it's going to look just like this. This is exactly what you're going to get using their stuff. So I just type in my stuff and hit sign in, and it'll do that for me. So I think just the idea of getting that, and you don't have to like roll your own solution to an account, is like huge and such a time saver. So deployment I mentioned earlier, you can deploy just with this command. So if I wanted to deploy my simple app right now, I would go Meteor do that. And if I have like a Meteor account, which is like free to create, then it'll do that for me, which is really cool. And kind of again used for prototyping. You wouldn't want to run something in production off of that. But
So that means you can like then go to like your phone.
yeah.
Would it have to be in the native web browser, or is it that like app thing that you said?
It would have to be in the web browser, but I know you can, if you're like developing, you can plug in your phone and like run the hybrid app that you're developing on like in your phone. So yes. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. All right. So if you're not deploying to, myapp.meteor.com, there's this thing called MUP, Meteor Up, which is going to make it simple. You're just going to go MUP deploy, and then that you just hit enter, but you have to have like a MUP configuration file. But it's still like pretty simple. And then hot code reload, I touched on earlier, and we got to see it kind of like change in real time. That'll happen on deployment too. So like if I'm, browsing my app, or somebody's browsing my app and doing things, and they have this current like state that they're in, and I deploy a new version of my website, they'll get that real update live, which is without having to refresh or anything, which is really cool. So any questions so far? No.
How is like the learning curve?
So the learning curve is it's pretty simple. Like You learned it. You did it. So it's really not. It's really really simple. I would.
You
say.
said like there is no like server or like client side. It's kind of like
Yeah, it's all kind of
really,
one.
Free for all almost. So is that like more of an advantage than it is a disadvantage to the traditional web app development?
Yeah, maybe in a sense it's kind of a disadvantage in the sense that it's unopinionated, so you don't know exactly what to do. But it's an advantage because you can kind of do what you want. So it's a little bit of both. To kind of show a quick overview of a real app, or a more real app, not just a simple one. I don't know how to zoom in over there. But I have a client folder with some templates and CSS and index. All this code is on GitHub. Is probably a better way to look at it. Whoops. But yeah, you would structure it in a way that makes more sense. Like obviously for simple things, you could put everything in one file, but that is not going to end well. So I think that's pretty much it. A couple things to reiterate. Meteor is growing rapidly. It is ranked number 9 in terms of stars on GitHub for I guess web development frameworks, or maybe in general. I'm not sure. There's over 8,000, not 9,000. Not yet. Packages on atmospherejs.com, which is the package where you can search for things. Looks so cool. I love how everything in Meteor, they're all like these cool astronomy puns. Astronomer. That's it. Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff, but you could search for packages this way, as well as asking for. Just searching in the community yourself. It's pretty easy. There's 260 meetups worldwide. I really want to start one here. Just haven't had the time this semester, so maybe that'll happen next semester. Stay tuned. So yeah, kind of reiterate, Lightspeed App Development. You have real-time through DDP, super developer-friendly. It's the platform of the future, and JavaScript. There's some other links here. Creator is kind of like Reddit, but for just Meteor stuff, and lately React and Node as well. There's some other stuff here too that are some really awesome links. The end. Unless you want me to talk more, I can talk forever. Yeah.
How'd you make this presentation?
That is a great question.
Wait, have you seen it?
No.
Yeah. So, real quick, if you wanted to get it, that is the link, bendugoodmyname.github.io/meteor-intro. If you want to see the slides, what?
We'll post it on the event.
Perfect. And then, so I built it. I just searched this earlier. So this is the GitHub page. So I'm using GitHub to like host it. And it basically looks like this one HTML file, which pretty much starts here, and each section is a slide, in essence, and it's pretty straightforward.
Wait, like is this a framework?
Yeah, so this framework is called RevealJS. This is, we can post this link too. This is their demo page. That doesn't want to click. There we go. So yeah, you can have nested stuff. I love it because I don't have to learn PowerPoint. HTML is so easy. Super simple, touch optimized. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. It's really cool. Different fun animations.
And you're hosting it through, it's not like the IO.
Yeah, so I'm hosting it through GitHub Pages. So if you have some project, so some repo, you can create a gh-pages branch, and like the name of the repo is Meteor Intro. I can go to my GitHub username.github.io/ then whatever the name of the repo is, which is Meteor Intro in this case, and it'll display whatever's here in this branch. So like I have in the other branch, such awesome README, are the two demos. The button, if you're aware of the Reddit button, I made a really simple one in Meteor that was like super easy. If you're interested, it's there. And let me do just one more thing to kind of Oops, I think let's not double run this. So you can run Android and iOS, like I said, using Cordova. And we'll see that here.
Real quick while that's building, do you use slides or that's like the visual editor for Reveal? Or do you...
I did it all in just HTML.
Okay. Is that easiest?
I don't have an issue with it. I like typing in HTML.
Yeah.
It's just the iOS emulator.
Cool.
So I just did it raw HTML. It's really simple. Like if you just, I don't even think I read any documentation. I went to their index.html page, just view source, copy pasted,
Nice.
and it worked. So
Awesome.
this is it, running in an iOS emulator. And no, wait, I forgot how to hit the home button.
It's Control-Shift-H.
Nice.
Command Shift.
Why is it wet? Oh, okay, I can scroll. Simple collections. And it just comes with a default app title and everything. New post events. There we have it. Seen it first. And you can do the same thing with Android. You have to just do a classic Safe Connect. You just have to do a Meteor add dash platform like iOS or Android, and then just Meteor on iOS, and you can test it there. Yes.
So do publishers and subscribers kind of encapsulate actually writing instead of not actually having to write a REST endpoint, you still have to write out the actual route. So for you it sounds like you write topics in a way, and you kind of just listen through this. And if you want to push data to this, there's something in the server that sounds kind of very REST-y. So
Yeah, it's like the WebSocket version of REST. It's very similar.
So wait, so what was it called? DDP?
DDP,
That's exactly what that published subscriber stuff was?
Yeah.
From?
Yeah, they implemented DDP is the protocol that they've, I guess, open sourced and they're using in the framework to do that. And it's all WebSockets, which is really cool.
So you never have to write out
No, you never have to write out the HTTP request. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. It's really easy. Yeah. So I guess that's it. Thank you guys for coming.
It helps you learn behind
I guess we'll post the links. And if you ever want to talk about JavaScript, it's again a gateway drug. I can't stop. So find me on Twitter or in class. I don't know.
So this was actually recorded, so if you go to, we'll be posting it on the event and also on Wixie and Software Engineering Club if you want to see it later, as well as links to all the stuff. This is a dope presentation.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for having me.